Hi everyone, welcome back at Charlotte from At Charlotte's House. Today I am building a bench that I will then upholster. I have an idea, let's hope it works. Stay tuned. I have been really excited about some of the different upholstery styles that I have seen lately. So I am building the base of the bench and then I'm gonna go inside and I'm going to upholster it with some channel tufting. I think it'll look amazing if I can pull it off. But first step is obviously building the bench. This is a pretty basic build. I am gonna cut this bench to length and I am going to use pocket holes to hold them together. I am not going to do anything to these boards because they're gonna be covered with fabric. So I'm not gonna worry about ripping down the corners. This should be really simple. Craig makes it super easy and they tell you right on the packaging what length screws you should use. So I'm using 2.5 inch Craig screws because my lumber is 1.5 inches. And I am going to start by, I think, lining up these corner pieces first. So I think I'm going to build all of these frames first, and then I'll put them together. So now, if I've done it right, these should fit together like this. Next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line up these pocket screws and I'm gonna begin to screw the bench together. One of the things I love about pocket holes is that they really pull together the boards nicely, and I often need a little help. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's gonna be covered with upholstery. The next step for this bench is upholstery, and this is completely optional. The bench would totally work just as it is. You would need to sand it down and then you could paint it, stain it, leave it, but I wanted to add a little cushion and a little fabric, so upholstery it is. The nice thing about upholstery is that I don't have to sand it or worry about any of the edges because this is gonna be wrapped in fabric. I am in love with channel tufting, and so I am going to try to channel tuft this bench so that it will be essentially a waterfall upholstered bench. It looks very easy on YouTube, but we'll see. I'm gonna start by figuring out how wide I want my tufting to be. So I am going to measure the width of my bench. This is 32 inches, so I'm thinking that maybe 4 inches would be about right because then I can get 8. And then this is 17 inches high, so I might have to do a slightly different measurement for the legs, but for now, I think I'm gonna start with the top and we'll go from there. I'm gonna mark on my bench where those tufts are gonna fall. So I'm gonna staple my cardboard in place, and this is just gonna give me a guide. Let me turn on my staple gun. I'll be right back. I always get asked, I prefer a pneumatic nailer. It means that I have to bring in my compressor, and that can sometimes kick in and be really loud, but it is such a small, easy to wield staple gun, and I find that it has a lot more power than any of the others I've tried, so for those reasons, it's worth it. I will link to this in the video profile. So I am simply gonna line up these cardboard strips with the guidelines that I just drew. Right now, I am simply using this cardboard as a guide, but moving forward, the cardboard will help give me a really nice crisp edge. So this is something that I recommend you picking up. Next, I'm gonna cut my foam, also to 4-inch strips. This is 1-inch foam, and then I think I'm also gonna use a batting, and hopefully that'll be enough. I don't need it to be giant because people are gonna be sitting on it, so if the tufting is too thick, that could be uncomfortable. So now I'm marking 4 inches and I will cut this. Anything thicker than 1 inch is pretty hard to cut with scissors. Right now, I'm quickly taking a look at the design on the fabric and I'm deciding which way I want to run the fabric on the upholstery. And this has sort of a subtle stripe to it. And I think that if I do it this way, keep in mind I'm adding those tufts, so it'll look sort of like that. And I actually think that preserves the pattern on the fabric a lot better than this would. I need enough fabric to wrap around the bench. The tufting's gonna wrap over the edge and come underneath. So I always give myself quite a bit of grace. That's a couple inches. You can always trim it, but you can't put it back on. I need to cut it into strips that I will then upholster around my foam. I don't know if I'll end up using batting. It may just be one layer that is too complicated to fit in here, but I thought I'd go ahead and cut a few strips just to play around with, so that's what I have here. And I'm cutting the strips at 5 inches, so an inch wider than the foam. And again, I don't know if that's gonna work, but I wanted to have a little bit extra just so I could grab it, because I think I'm gonna wanna staple it around the foam, but I didn't want too much to be messy when I go back with the fabric. We don't know. We don't know, guys. That's the answer. We're just winging it. There's only so much time I can spend watching videos on YouTube about this. Just gotta do it. Here's where these cardboard strips come in handy. So I'm going to staple this. Notice that I'm stapling it right on top of that first cardboard strip. So now, you see when I pull it over, it gives me that nice crisp seam. So I'm gonna layer in my foam and my batting. I'm actually gonna give my batting just a little staple to secure it. And I wanna make sure that my foam is really tucked in nicely. And then I'm gonna pull everything over the top nice and tight. Now, I think this one could have been a little tighter, so I'm gonna make sure I wanna pull this second one really tight. Start at the middle, work myself out. Now, I see a few little pulls right here, but honestly, when I pull it tight this way, I think a lot of those will go away. And maybe they won't. This is my last little bit of tufting for the top, and I wanted to give you a close-up look. So what I'm doing is all of my staples are going on that guideline that I put down at the very beginning. And when I start a new tuft, I put the fabric upside down, and then I'm taking my strip of cardboard and I am feeling with my fingers and I am stapling this right on top of that other piece of cardboard. So this is why you use the cardboard. You want that nice crisp edge here. Then I'm going in and I am first taking my batting and I'm just holding it in place with 3 or 4 staples. And then I'm tucking my foam into place. Now, because this is the last one, it's gonna be a little bit different. I'm gonna wrap everything over the edge and then I'll clean it up when I do the side. So And first, I want to make sure that the foam is really kind of pressed in against that seam. And then I'm pulling my batting over really tight. So I'm feeling with my fingers, and I want that foam to be right up against the corner. And I used, I don't know, 4 or 5 staples just to hold the batting in place. And then I'm gonna come around with the fabric, and I'm gonna pull this really tight over the top. And I always start in the middle and then go towards the outside. Now I'm gonna tuft the ends, and then I'll turn it over and figure out how I'm gonna wrap this around the sides. I wanted to give you a peek of the legs. I am doing them exactly the same way I did the top. So I have measured, I put my cardboard strips. I already have one fabric here to fold over. So it's really similar. I had to add a slightly longer strip at the end. So these are the same 4 inches as the rest of the bench. And then this end piece is 5 inches, but I am not worried about that. One thing I want you to make note of, because I didn't trim off the corners of this foam, I am making sure when I wrap it with the batting that I tuck those edges under if possible. It just makes it a little bit smoother. But again, it's a 1-inch foam, so it's pretty easy to give it the shape I want just by wrapping it tightly. You want to be careful that you get this cardboard strip really tight against that other tufting, because on the top, there's a couple places where you can't really see it, but I didn't overlap it quite enough and I could see a staple. So just double check that. Nice and tight. Now I'm working on the edge, and I think I figured out a solution that is going to be pretty neat. So I'm going one at a time, and I'm sort of going in the same order that I put it in. So this was the first strip I put on, and I'm folding that over. And the first thing I'm doing is I am cutting both the foam and the batting, and I'm cutting it so that it sort of comes to this corner. And then I'm using the excess fabric, and I'm just pulling it over. And then I'm stapling it on the underside. Now, one thing, notice that I'm stapling it about 1 inch to 1 centimeter below the corner. I'm gonna have to put another piece of fabric over this to cover the bottom. And so I want that to come right up to the edge. So I figured it would be a little bit easier if those staples weren't on top of each other, but I don't know if that will help or not. I've finished all the tufting and it looks fantastic. I'm really happy with it. So now I need to figure out the bottom. Obviously I don't need to really upholster it, but I do want to cover it with fabric. I think I'll put some batting in there just to help kind of soften some of these edges. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim all this excess fabric. So the last step for the bench project is I want to cover the underside with fabric and batting as well. And I'd love it to be one smooth section. So unfortunately, I mean, it's not unfortunate. I'm being lazy because I could have sewed my fabric. I didn't feel like sewing it, so I'm actually gonna run the direction of the fabric a little bit differently, but I'm not too fussed. I think it'll still look fine. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to get more of my cardboard and I am going to staple one clean edge of the fabric along this side, and then I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do to pull it tight on this side so that you don't see any of those exposed staples. It's a little hard to see what's going on, but I'm starting on the edge of one leg, and I have my cardboard and my fabric, and then I'm just gonna keep working my way around the underside, and I'm just trying to get it as close to the edge as I can. So the fabric's secured on one side, and I'm gonna pull it across the underside of the bench, but obviously there's no way for me to attach it on this side without showing the staples, which is where this torture device comes in. It looks like, I don't know what, and it is sharp, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna staple this in place, and then the fabric is actually gonna reach over, these teeth are gonna grip it, and this is a way to hide the fabric. So the first step is to staple this guy along the edge. So essentially what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line up one side of my staple gun here, and I'm gonna staple each of these guys in place. This is sort of hard to show on camera, but what I'm doing is I'm folding these teeth over, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to trim the fabric. This will tuck inside like that, and then I'll hammer it shut, hopefully. I used a flat nose screwdriver to sort of tuck the fabric into these creases, and then you go back with your hammer, you hammer it down, and it pulls the fabric tight. What I have done here is I have simply rubber banded a piece of felt around my hammer. I've learned that if you don't have sort of a rubber mallet, sometimes the metal hammer will actually put holes in the fabric because it's hammered against the metal. So I always wrap it with some fabric. So I apologize that I didn't show you that in the best of lighting, but I really wanted to finish the bench. To finish off the bottom of the legs, I'm simply going to fold it over, and then I'm gonna hammer these feet in place, and it holds the fabric still. But before I start, I wanna trim the fabric because I'm ultimately gonna fold it over once, and that's it. So I have to trim the fabric. And I probably could use a little hot glue for this step as well. I could not be happier with this bench. I'm still sort of amazed that I pulled it off, which is good news for you, because that means that if I can do it, you can do it. I am always very frustrated with upholstery, and at no point during this project was I frustrated. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and have a great day, everyone.